Hello everyone and good afternoon. It's still me, Elke Weissmann, at Edgehill University. We have our second panel for today, which is about fan curation and online TV. And we've got two speakers. As before, we're going to take the two papers one after the other and then have the question and answers afterwards. We will also, or I will also interject 2 minutes before 20 minutes are up to say 2 minutes, so that you know you need to wrap up as presenters. So our first speaker today is Martins Néia, who's a screenwriter, playwright, and theatre director. He holds a PhD in communications from the University of São Paulo, Brazil, and a BA in performing arts from the State University of Londrina. He is also a workshop instructor and speaker with the Pontos MIS program from the São Paulo Museum of Image and Sound, as well as a member of the Screenwriting Research Network and the International Network of Communication Historiographers. Today, he will talk to us about the outliers of Brazilian TV history. Over to you.
Let me see. Thank you, Professor Elke. Thanks to the entire conference team for this space and for accepting my work. I would like to apologize because I have a severe flu. My voice is also not very good. My reasoning is lower than usual, especially in English, but I promise I will do my best. My presentation starts from a reflection of my PhD research process. My thesis sought to trace a cultural history of the Brazilian telenovela. Telenovela is the main format of TV fiction in Brazil and Latin America in general. As I finished my research during the pandemic, I was unable to go in person to some collections and museums, and I had to explore the digital environment in search of historical television content. I propose here a reflection referring then to which history or which histories of Brazilian TV have been told and which have not yet been told. My discussion starts from three fundamental axes. First, the difficulty of looking beyond the centrality of Red Globo in Brazil's audiovisual scene. Second, the archivability and preservation of Brazilian television content over time. And third, the various agents of TV memory present in the digital environment. I will talk about them starting from a discussion on the history of TV in Brazil in general terms, and a chronology concerning the audiovisual archiving of television content. TV in Brazil appears in 1950 with the inauguration of TV2P, the first television network in Latin America. In those early days, most programs were live, and that's why we have few audiovisual materials left from that time, only excerpts that were recorded on film. Videotape was implemented in Brazil in the 60s, boosting the process of transitioning regional audiences towards the reach of a national audience. The videotape, however, did not immediately become the guarantee that TV networks would preserve their archives. There was still no awareness of the importance of TV content as historical documents and records of an era. For economic reasons, many tapes were reused, while others were lost in accidents such as floods or fires. In 1964, we have a coup d'etat in Brazil. The military takes power and will preside over the country until 1985. In 1965, we have the inauguration of TV Globo, a broadcaster that in the 70s becomes the leader of audience in the country, a position it holds until today. Globo will also be the TV channel that will best systematize its history in print and online publications and projects. At the end of the 90s, when TV was about to complete 50 years in Brazil, Globo launched the Memória Globo project, the Global Memory Project, a series of initiatives aimed at preserving and telling the history of the station and other communication vehicles of the Globo Group. This is a very interesting institutional memory project that will culminate in the late 2000s with the launch of the Memória Global website. As historians, as communicologists, however, we must arm ourselves with efforts to go beyond the official narratives promoted by the channel, because it is clear that this official history of the network is the way in which it interested in seeing its history told. I selected here, for example, this on the screen is the home of the Memória Global website, and these two tabs here, these two tabs refer to mistakes made by the broadcaster, mainly in journalistic coverage, and to false accusations, according to Globo itself, that is received during its history. The role of TV Globo often also obliterates the history of other broadcasters, especially channels that are no longer in activity, such as TV2P and TV Excelsior, which were important broadcasters in the formulation of a Brazilian televisual language, a Brazilian television and televisual language, working with resources that were later incorporated by Globo. And this is sometimes not seen precisely because we have few audiovisual records from these stations, especially TV Excelsior, which closed in the early 70s. But the digital environment also has seen a growing proliferation of clips, random episodes, and full programs from the country's TV past, even on the part of public institutions dedicated to preserving audiovisual production. Since 2009, the Brazilian Cinematheque maintains the Bank of Cultural Content, a platform which offers vintage productions from Brazil's media history. At the bank, visitors can, for instance, watch several news reels and full telenovela episodes by defunct TV2P, because the Cinematheque owns a large part of the state of this station. The maintenance of this archive is currently under threat from Jair Bolsonaro's government's project to dismantle the Brazilian Cinematheque. When I was finishing my PhD research, for example, the Bank of Cultural Content was offline. But luck for me, many people had downloaded several of the videos from the Bank of Cultural Content and posted these videos on YouTube. This is because in this space we have a strong presence of Brazilian TV fans. Many of these fans have ROM recordings of TV old shows. The VCR entered in the Brazilian market in the 80s, and then we have the advent of the DVD. These fans take advantage of collective digital video sharing platforms to archive materials they have collected during their lifetime. Hence, we have authors like Niger et al. Seeing YouTube as this video library of the contemporary popular memory, or Penchevsky thinking of these spaces as technologically mediated inter-archives. Some of these fans become known for these posts, even starting to receive tapes from professionals who in the past worked at TV stations. And here I bring a very interesting case, which is from this telenovela that was not aired, called O Marajá. O Marajá was produced by a now defunct channel, Rede Manchete, and it satirized the political career and the impeachment of the former president, Fernando Collor de Mello. This in 1993, a year after he left the presidency. Fernando Collor filed a lawsuit in court and managed to prevent this telenovela from being broadcast in the first case of this type of censorship after the country's redemocratization and the promulgation of a new constitution that guaranteed the freedom of expression and an end to censorship as a state practice. At the time of the dictatorship, we already had telenovela censored in this way, prevented from airing even after having the production approved by the censorship department. Well, this YouTube channel, Canal Memória or Memory channel, known for posting old TV content, made available at the beginning of this year what would be the first episode of Omarajá, saying that it received this tape from one of the actors who worked on the telenovela. I think this is a case that illustrates how these agents of TV memory in the digital environment help to tell not only TV histories that haven't been told yet, but even histories that didn't happen due to political, economic pressures, illuminating these outliers of TV history. And this case also demonstrates how fans' activities on YouTube or on these platforms fosters the general public's curiosity in the history of Brazilian TV networks that are no longer active. Often, though, these fans' practices collide with the interests of present-day networks. Globo constantly uses copyright claims to shut down YouTube channels sharing some of its old programs, for example. But this imbroglio validates the recognition that such fans amass, which turns them into professional amateurs as they act as agents of TV memory in the digital era. And another interesting phenomenon that we observe in the digital environment is the over-the-top platforms of broadcasters, precisely because TV channels have taken advantage of these platforms as repositories for historical television content. And this type of content has helped broadcasters, especially global, in the streaming war against transnational services such as Netflix, Amazon, Disney. Globo has never licensed any type of content for the Netflix catalog, unlike competing TV channels. The very fact that this historical content is now available to stream, and this is a direct result of negotiations involving both the rights of those professionals features in these programs, as well as the marketing strategies devised by these networks. It is in that sense, then, that OTT platforms operate as archivists and at the same time editors of historical knowledge of Brazil's audiovisual past. Tantamount to what is available in these catalogs are the gaps and cracks through which streaming allows us to envisage certain institutional, political, and economic dynamics of Brazilian media conglomerates, and even the forms of archiving this content. For example, there are telenovelas available to stream in a condensed version because they didn't have their tapes properly stored. There are other telenovelas that will never appear on streaming because their tape were lost, either by accident or on purpose. For example, Coração Alado, a telenovela aired in 1980, still there in the dictatorship, had a scene of a female masturbation. To avoid any kind of problem with the federal government, Globo disappeared with the tape of this episode from its archives the next day of the broadcast. Streaming also awakens, therefore, as a lieu de mémoire, in the terms of Pierre Nora, from Brazilian television. Anyway, I think I bring more questions than answers. Now I want to map in more details these actors involved in the maintenance and in the narration of Brazilian TV memory. But I think that this panorama already gives the dimension of some challenge for anyone who is a TV historian, thinking about how fans engage in the historicization of the vehicle and the paths that open up for these TV histories that have yet to be told. These are my references. I hope I was clear and I remain available for the debate afterwards. Thank you very much for your attention.
How very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
I'm just gonna switch my camera on. So yeah, very, very fascinating. I'm looking forward to asking you some questions in the Q&A. But before we get to that, I want to hand over to Sydney, to Sydney Garner from the University of Texas in Austin. Sydney is a master's student in media studies at the University of Texas at Austin. She graduated from the University of Louisville in 2021 with BAs in Pan-African Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. She's also a 2020 scholar of the Moore Undergraduate Research Apprentice Program at UNC Chapel Hill. Her interests include fan and audience studies, especially in regards to identity and representation of race, gender, and sexuality. Prior research includes police propaganda in Fox and NBC's Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and the relationship between comedy and race in recent buddy cop films. Today, she's going to talk to us about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and in particular, she's going to look at falling in love with a 15-year-old cartoon, streaming fandom versus Renaissance and Avatar. Over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. So the research that I will be presenting on is called Falling in Love with a 15-Year-Old Cartoon, Streaming Fandom Renaissance in Avatar: The Last Airbender. I will discuss the revival of Avatar and its fandoms received since May 2020 when Netflix added the show to its American catalog, and I will discuss what this could mean for the cycles of television fandom. Before I begin, here's a quick outline of my presentation. I'll give some background on the show and its relevant events. I'll detail the factors that led to the fandom renaissance. And next, I will explain the reactions of fans on Tumblr, followed by my methods, findings, and analysis. And I will conclude with my final thoughts and how Avatar's renaissance relates to streaming and a possible future for fandom culture. For those that don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is an Asian-inspired fantasy cartoon that was released on Netflix from 2005, or released on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008. Its main features are its storytelling and world building, in which the world is divided into 4 nations based on the elements of water, earth, fire, and air. People called benders can manipulate or bend each element, and one person, the Avatar, can bend all 4 and is tasked with maintaining peace and balance. Once the Avatar dies, their soul is reincarnated into another person, and they are also tasked with maintaining that balance. The main conflict of the show is a global war in which the Fire Nation wants supremacy over all other nations. Avatar Aang is accompanied by Katara and Sokka from the Southern Water Tribe, and later Zuko, the banished prince of the Fire Nation. Together, they must put an end to the war. And of course, there are more characters and plots, but for the purposes of my argument, only these 4 characters really need to be known. Since 2008, Avatar has maintained relevance with numerous tie-ins, including graphic novels, video games, and a sequel series called The Legend of Korra, which follows the Avatar after Aang. Its fandom has also been well sustained with a consistent level of activity. But even 15 years after its debut, the fandom picked up more steam after a couple of significant events. A few years ago, Netflix announced its live-action adaptation of the show, and in May 2020, it released the full series on its American version of the platform. And of course, we should all be familiar with the world-changing event that happened in 2020 that caused us all to stay at home, quarantine in general. And with these lockdowns and stay-at-home orders and a general unease of being in public, most people didn't have a choice but to waste time watching TV. Additionally, in the United States, there were police brutality-related protests after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and those were fresh on public mind. And some people use the show Avatar both as a lens through which to view the world with its mature themes and philosophy. They also used it as a way to kind of escape the world around us because, of course, it's a children's cartoon. And on the slide, you can see some of the posters used by people who protested for Black Lives Matter. They all say only justice will bring peace, which is a quote from one of the previous avatars, Avatar Kyoshi, when she tells Aang this when he is having trouble accepting what he must do in order to end the war. All of this is to say that there was a perfect storm for Avatar to reach new heights of popularity. The show spent 61 days on the Netflix top 10 list, more than any other show, and the Avatar fandom grew exponentially. Platforms like Tumblr, Twitter, and TikTok saw massive upticks in content, and the amount of fan products overall increased as well. Specifically, I tracked how fan fiction of the show evolved from 2013 to 2021, and my findings indicated some very interesting things. But before this, I want to draw attention to my discourse analysis of the Avatar fandom on Tumblr. By searching through various Avatar-related tags around May 2020 and into the following months, I found a few interesting things. First, there was a dichotomy between established fans and new fans. Established fans were the ones already familiar with the show before it was on Netflix. They may have watched it as a kid and stayed with the fandom, or they may have watched it in the years after it was aired on things like box sets. And new fans were those who watched Avatar and engaged with its fandoms for the first time in May 2020. Some could have been older, maybe watching for nostalgia and then jumping into the fandom, but a general consensus among all fans was that the new fans were younger, teenagers and people in their early 20s that might have missed the show when it aired or were even too young to have seen it in the first place. And the new fans arrived in May 2020 and both brought in new discourse and reignited old discourse, especially around shipping, which is the romantic pairing of two or more characters. Established fans had mixed reactions to the new fans. Some were happy that others were finding joy in a show that they've enjoyed, and they were happy that they were bringing in new theories and content. Others, in general, were more neutral, just sort of acknowledging that there were new fans, while others were not too happy about the new fans and how they were rehashing old arguments. In particular, shipping has always been a major part of the Avatar fandom, almost since the beginning. Aang, who is a 12-year-old boy, and Katara, who is a 14-year-old girl, are teased throughout the show to have feelings for each other, and spoiler, in the end of the last episode, they do get together. However, many fans have felt that Zuko, a 16-year-old boy, would have made a better fit for Katara for various reasons, one of them being that Aang is 12, and Zuko is kind of like the older bad boy. Also, a side note that the creators of the show were always well aware of the Zutara ship and even included a nod to it in a short cartoon that was released with the show's box sets. Up until recently, the shipping war between Katang, a combination of Katara and Aang, and Zutara, a combination of Zuko and Katara, have had a monopoly over the Avatar fandom. Their discourse dominated over all other ships, including Zuka, which is a combination of Zuko and Sokka. Sokka is Katara's 16-year-old brother, and thus Zuka would be a queer relationship between two boys. People that shipped them often cited how they complemented each other, both being the older brother with various pressures put upon them. And the fans that shipped Zuko and Sokka sometimes called themselves Zuka Nation and have always been an undercurrent within the fandom, but that all changed in May 2020. I used the Wayback Machine to track the amount of fan fictions written for the various ships since 2013 on a site called Archive of Our Own, a popular fan fiction hosting website. The Wayback Machine basically allows you to look at snapshots of past versions of a website, and there were snapshots of the Avatar page on Archive of Our Own. 2013 was the start point because all data before then was pretty much insignificant. On the slide, there is a screenshot of the Wayback Machine and the available snapshots that I could look through. And the other image is how I actually calculated the data points for my graph, which is on the next slide. As you can see, next to each pairing is a number which corresponds to the number of fan fictions written for that ship up to that point. Basically, I took an Excel sheet and wrote down all those numbers for the top 5 ships. As best as I could, I spread out collection points and came up with 51 dates between January 22nd, 2013 and October 7th, 2021, in which I looked at the number of fan fictions written for each of the top 5 ships, which did include Katang, Zutara, and Zuka. If you're wondering, these top 5 ships combined make up less than 50% of all of the Avatar fics that have been written, which just goes to show how varied and active this fandom really is. Also, my numbers here may be a bit distorted because a single fan fiction can have more than one of these pairings tagged or listed, and thus these numbers can kind of count for multiple ships. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised with the results. So on May 15th, 2020, the day that Avatar was added to Netflix, Zutara held almost 20% of all fan fictions written, while Zuka held only 6.2%. But in just 2 months, the amount of Zuka fanfics went from 6% to 10%. And in a year and a half later, Zutara shares went down to 18.6%, while the share of Zuka fics actually rose to 16%. The amount of Zutara fanfics had only increased by 2.4 times, but the amount of Zuka fics increased nearly 7-fold. So in other words, Zuka fans moved 3 times faster in posting fanfictions than Zutara fans did. And for a bit more context, as of yesterday, the Zuka tag had around 5,500 fanfics posted on Archive of Our Own, a goal that Zutara only managed to hit in August 2021, well after the Renaissance hit its stride. This basically means that the Zuka writers went from just a few hundred fanfictions to over 5,000 at a rate much faster than Zutara. And the growth of Zuka fanfic shows a vested interest in their relationship more so than any other ships within the show. Though the shipping of male characters has always had its space in fanfiction, I believe that there is a distinct connection to queerness in the queer community that makes Zuka's prominence that much deeper. Fans of the show, both established and new, made remarks about how new fans, most likely younger fans as opposed to established fans that have aged along with the show, are bringing their own queerness into their fan activities. On the slide here, I have a Tumblr post which explains how many fans felt about the Renaissance. The text of the post reads, "I don't think I realized how firmly I've managed to ingrain myself in the Zuka corner of the fandom until a random Zutara fan art showed up on my dash and I did a literal double take." And the meme that they posted along with the text demonstrates the fact that with the Zuka Renaissance, there was so much content to the point that one could be isolated from the fandom's most popular pairing. Overall, there is a notable difference between the established Avatar fandom and the new fandom that arose since May 2020. Netflix, of course, played a huge role in this renaissance. Binge watching surely allowed more people overall to watch the show, and its rewind and fast forward functions, as well as the fact that the show is streamed rather than needing the hassle of things like DVDs as in the past, has made it easier to dissect the show and create theories, edits, GIFs, and all types of other things. And of course, the social milieu surrounding the show is different. It's no longer the late 2000s. We're in the 2020s, and queerness has a much bigger spotlight, and more people are willing to engage in queer content and create queer content more openly. However, none of this renaissance would have been possible if not for the already established fandom that held up the show for over 15 years. So one of the prerequisites for a renaissance may be an established, well-maintained fandom. If so, the renaissance of Avatar begs the existence of revivals and renaissances for other shows and franchises and their fandoms. This was already partially mentioned by Avatar fans that also consumed the Twilight series. The Twilight films were added to Netflix in July 2021, but before then, in May 2020, there was an announcement of a new novel, and since then, the Twilight fandom was set on a path for renaissance. For me, I would be very interested in seeing this Renaissance concept applied to shows like Supernatural, which is a fandom favorite and arguably a cultural phenomenon that also began airing in 2005. And though the show ended in 2020, well into the streaming age, I would be interested to see what would happen when the show is given the Avatar treatment and brought back into mass relevance 15 or so years from now. Will the same discourse be rehashed? Will the same ships be popular? How will the 2030s change the perception of the show and its surrounding social milieu? Studying Avatar in this way is important, not just because of what it can tell us about other shows and their potential for fandom renaissance, but also how shows like Avatar are often overlooked, both by academics and television viewers, because it is a children's cartoon. However, online authors and writers back in May 2020, in trying to convince people to watch the show for their next quarantine watch, we're comparing Avatar to other shows like Game of Thrones and even Breaking Bad, and praising its storytelling and world building, its animation quality, and its comedy. And many spoke of its social and political impact and how its mature themes of war, genocide, difference, and disability are easily conveyed, not just in a way children can understand, but also in a way that everyone, regardless of age, can be entertained and educated. We should look to these shows on the fringes and ask how they can help us make sense of the trends and possibilities of other media. Thank you, and here are some of my sources.
Super, thank you so much, both Sydney and Lucas, for going slightly under even. That's nice, that gives us quite a bit of time to talk. Can I invite everyone to put their cameras on so that we can see each other? That would be lovely. And then also, obviously, I would like to invite everyone to ask their questions. And feel free to put them into the chat as well. And if there's no one willing to break the ice, I will do that, as we have been doing in this conference so far. What struck me about both of your papers, Lucas and Sydney, is that with those fan practices come quite significant changes in a way to either how the programs or you know the history of the program has been understood in the past, or yeah, how we thought about something basically in relation to television. So how important do you think is it to, I mean, for Sydney, in your case, sorry, this is really rambly because I haven't fully formulated that question yet. So in your case, what really strikes me is that it brings precisely, you know, the queer element, you know, which is such a big element of fan practices. If you think about Star Trek, if you think about, you know, the Sherlock Holmes fandom, queerness is so visible in the fan practices. So it's really fascinating that in The Last Airbender, this doesn't appear until quite late, and only in the new fandom in a way. But what strikes me about this is that fans, through that practice of reimagining The Last Airbender, fans rewrite the show to some extent, obviously, and bring in a voice that has been ignored. Similarly, in the history of Brazilian television, the stuff that is being brought in is stuff that has been taken out by the censors, which is really interesting. So what does that tell us about the, and I'm using that word again, about the disruptive potential and the truly disruptive potential of fans in terms of really challenging hegemonic discourses and hegemonic imaginations of society. Yeah, I think that's it. Do you want to go first, Lucas?
Okay. I think in my research, fans are important because I observe fans also as archivists. So it's interesting because they contest hegemonic history of television, this history of global thinking about the. I think it's another kind of looking, another kind of perception about this history, even the history of TV Global. This is very interesting. And this is interesting because these histories starts from the affection, that these fans have with that content, because they recorded old TV shows, and not all the TV shows of the past, but that TV shows that they like it. So I think this is interesting because it's another narratives talking about the history of Brazilian TV, and with this affection and these other lookings, because it's not the institutional history, the history of global by global. The history of Brazilian TV has an oral tradition of the professionals of the early years of television. It's very interesting, and we have, for example, we can search in newspapers, in another formats of media about this history. But for example, how can I search LGBTQ more characters in early TVs or in a TV in times of dictatorship, that we don't have materials of that time? We don't have this subject. I think the subject is there, but it's not there, and we have this challenge to. I think it's I don't know the term in English, but it's a more specific search to understand the how these characters were in the narratives, or in that period. So I think it's a challenge, and I think that these memories of fans can help us in this other history. So that's why I think it's a fascinating world, and we are talking about these curator fans that they have their own archive, and I think this is very interesting. And now with the digital platforms, we have archives or platforms with a possibility of archivability. We have we also have this methodological questions in this kind of research.
That's great. And Sydney, what do you think in terms of challenging hegemonic imaginations of society through precisely the rewriting of queer stories in The Last Airbender?
Yeah, I'd say overall that fans have just a massive influence on the things that get done within the show. I want to say for the 2020 Netflix adaptation, there like already have been talks of making the characters within the show queer. So not necessarily like rewriting, but maybe like imposing queerness onto them where like it hasn't been there before. But even like I said in the presentation, it was, I think the show was actually still airing when the creators of the show were talking about how much all of the fans loved Zutara, and how they even made it like a point in one of the shorts that they did for the box sets. So yeah, just to see how much the fandom is shifting, it's possible that like all these different queer imaginings can also actually become possibilities for the new show. And I didn't mention this in the presentation, but along with Netflix adding or creating that show, Paramount Studios is actually creating Avatar Studios, which is going to have its entire own wing of Avatar related content, including like movies, other TV shows. So as much as the fans have like loved this fandom and participated in it, all the hard work is kind of like paying off. And there's just like it's so open, like all the different possibilities that can happen with the show.
Great. Any further questions? And feel free. Oh yeah, Robert.
This is not a fully formed question, so apologies if it's a rant as well. I'm just thinking about the previous panel as well, and how there was this idea there across the panels of fans kind of performing labor that the industry maybe used to perform or should perform. I don't know. And I may have two separate questions based on that though. But in terms of what you say about Bolsonaro dismantling the Cinematheque and this idea of a history that's kind of the official history that obliterates all these other histories, are fans there kind of, is the study of fans for you, Lucas, kind of highlighting certain trends, maybe neoliberal trends, maybe just trends about like the way the industry is going with you know, the decline of physical media towards streaming? Are fans increasingly important, I suppose, in doing historian work for you? And for Sydney, a separate question, I suppose, but like this idea of shipping. I'm thinking about this, in the previous panel, we had this idea of rivalries. Building a rivalry, a sense of rivalry is very important for consumption. People consume more when there's a sense of a rivalry. And when you were talking about these shipping rivalries, it made me think, is that increasingly a part of the appeal of text like this? So my question is shipping kind of being encouraged in any way as part of the buzz around a show? Do you think when you get like Supernatural coming back in however many years, it will be kind of pushed into these kind of fan wars to generate interest? Is that a thing that you see happening as part of the fan labor, as part of the industry? So those are two very kind of divergent questions around the same idea of fans doing work that the industry no longer does. But hopefully that made sense.
Lucas, do you want to start?
Okay. What I think it's interesting because we are talking, in my case, about fans of an old tradition, of the traditional media, the television as a traditional media, that work in this new media, telling stories about from the old media. So I think it's very interesting, this combination of in this circuit of media. And I think it's interesting. We made questions about what is old, what's new media, and now we are seeing this logic of schedule, the TV schedule on streaming, because now just one episode for a week, and I think this is interesting. And thinking in these fans, I think they have this important role to talk about these other histories. And now, in our context, for example, I oh my God, I think it's my salvation. I don't know the term in English, because when I finished my PhD research, the website of Brazilian Cinematheque was offline, and oh my God, what can I do now? And I saw that content on YouTube because of these fans, and other content because these fans had their own archives, and they want to share with other people, and they had these disputes with broadcasters. Oh, I have a video from Globo, and this video it's not more in the archive of Globo, but Globo doesn't want that this video stay on YouTube, and we have these disputes. And I think this is legitimation of this defense practice, because I think this is very interesting because of this. And we have this panel of these other actors of TV memory, and obviously and we have a version of an emotional version of the history of a TV program or another thing. But I think this is very interesting because we are talking that about this old media that was constructed by marketing and emotion. So I think that we have this circuit and these new possibilities. We have challenged to think in our research methodologically or epistemologically. I think that we have many questions about it, but it's interesting, it's valid, because I think that we have new perspectives too with this thing.
Sydney, what do you think? What about the labor of the fans in terms of shipping and basically bringing back supernatural, perhaps, and the industry basically encouraging the shipping in order to get greater marketing share in a way?
Yeah, so first I'll talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender and what kind of went on with that show. So, like you said, like shipping and rivalry is a very big part of both the fandom and the show itself. So, like I said, the creators knew about what people were shipping, and even the voice actors knew, and the voice actors had their own opinions about who Katara should end up with. And I will say that for the new show and whatever comes out within the universe, that any of the shipping and rivalry will be something for like the nostalgic fans or the older fans, because they might be able to compare and contrast between the 2005 show and the new show, and they'll be much more interested in seeing how all of that plays out. And also, the show back in 2005 to 2008 was very aware of what fans were doing and what they wanted. And they kind of helped the ship along. So at certain points, they kind of play up Zuko's character in order to make him fit the mold of the bad boy in a certain way. They made him more angsty. They gave him a lot more angry characteristics that made more sense for the Zutara ship, and that kind of egg fans on in that way. For Supernatural, I will say I've only ever seen a few episodes of it, so I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that there was an episode of Supernatural sometime in their later seasons, they do have like 15 or 16 seasons, I think. And the episode was titled Fan Fiction, I believe, in which, depending on your viewpoint, they either like made fun of the fandom or they like praised it for what they wanted or what they did. So I think in about 15 years or so, the same ships might still be popular just because the fandom put so much work into making the ships of Supernatural as popular as they are. And also the curators acknowledged what ships were popular. So they could still be the same. Also because I believe there are really only 2 popular pairings in the show. And they put, both the fans and the people who made the show put a lot of effort into kind of crafting that relationship all the way until the very end, in which a lot of fans back in 2020, when the last episode aired, they were both like surprised and upset and had a lot of feelings about the way that it ended and how the kind of like love confession of it worked. So we just have to wait and see what happens in 15 years.
Great. Any further questions? If not, can we show our appreciation again? Oh, hold on. Oh, no, there's someone wanting to come in quite late. If not, can we show our appreciation again for the 2 speakers who gave us really, really interesting insights into the the role of fans in terms of curating and rewriting television history, I think. So thank you very much, both of you. Our next panel obviously is not until Monday, but I hope to see quite a few of you then, and I'll obviously send an email out before then. Take care and have a good weekend. Bye.